Numbers in Tasmania. Let's go down to the Apple Isle, which could be quite important in this election because if you look at these seats, Lyons, Bass and Braddon all up for play. And right now, it's a wall of red. Let's go into them. Braddon was held by 8% before this election. So what's happening in terms of the swing so far? Big swing towards the Labor Party, 16%, and a big swing away from the Liberal Party. We're seeing the independent vote right up as well. These are very early numbers, and this is an estimated, not an actual preference flow, but so far that it's getting Labor just in front. Now, the hazard on this, of course, is these early votes, these on-the-day votes, are not necessarily going to be reflective. Still interesting, the size more than anything else of what's happening there. Let's go to Bass as well. This one held on a much smaller margin. You can see here, 1.4%, I should say, 0.8% is counted. Similar story. Big swing for the Labor Party and basically picking up the Liberal vote is a pretty neat exchange there of what's happening. At the moment on that two-party preferred, that's basically the swing going to Labor. So that's more the sort of swing you'll need. So early on, we're not going to say exactly what's happening there, but decent early vibe, you would have to say, from Labor on some of those early booths. Going to Victoria as well, this is going to be, I still think, the most important state when we're looking at this election in terms of if Labor's going to hang on, given they want to avoid losses. Hawke started off at 7.6%. Now, again, let's get straight into these numbers. Very early in the count, 0.7, so not tiny, but very early on the count. You can see a swing towards Sam Ray and a swing slightly towards the Liberal Party and a bit of One Nation vote picking up. This was always the theory. How much might One Nation pick up and how much will that hurt Labor in terms of that preference flow? This is estimated so far. It's actually going to Sam Ray. Now, these are basically two towns in Hawke. It's a peri-urban electorate. It takes in some suburbs and some regions. So nobody, I'm told, is getting carried away from this in terms of Labor HQ, but interesting numbers that are coming in regardless. Let's have a look as well within New South Wales. Now, I saw there we had some good numbers in Robertson. Let's go to the Hunter region. Here's Robertson here. Now, this one, if you remind yourself, right now, that's a pretty good, very early margin for Labor. The margin they're defending is 2.2%, so clearly a target seat. Slight swing towards Gordon Reid. Here's the problem. Very early on, 1.8%, a swing against the Liberal Party, a very small swing against the Greens and a bit of uptick again on One Nation, who seem to be swinging towards them basically everywhere we're seeing, so the polls seem to be right on that front. But 2.2 on those very, very early results becomes 59% in terms of that margin. So, look, we are wary very much of the on-the-day vote is not going to tell the whole story. I would still say from very, very early vote, Kieran, so far, I think Labor would feel a lot better about themselves very early on, caveats and all that, than the coalition on some of these early votes. Yep,
the caveats are there, but well said. Thank you, Tom. Let's go, in fact, live to the campaign headquarters now. I want to check in with Paul Murray, Sharri Markson at Peter Dutton's campaign, also Laura and Chris. Paul and Sharri, first to you. What's your read of the results as they stand?
Well, it is just a trickle. It is hundreds of votes, and I know that greater brains than mine and the computing power and the collective expertise that is gathered here is starting to see the potential of a trend. But again, as we were discussing before, Sharri, the reality here is that the Liberal Party is very clear about why the first hour might be different than the second hour.
Exactly. So the Liberal Party is very conscious of making the point that these trends that we might be seeing so far do not count the pre-polling. Pre-polling is expected to heavily favour the coalition. That's not going to be counted until after today's vote. As you know, we've had probably a near record number of people voting before today. So that trend might shift. And the other thing that we're starting to hear now is just the impact that the public polling has had throughout the campaign. You know, it really gave Labor momentum. It favoured them. That became a media narrative. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, this idea that Albanese had picked up that Dutton was running a bad campaign. But at the end of the day, the Libs feel that a number in the mid-60s would be respectable. I mean, you've got to remember, the government has only changed 3 times since 2000. We've only had a change of government 3 times, 2007, 2013 and 2022. And in fact, the government of the day has only changed 9 times since 1930. So this is a rare occurrence. We're probably not going to see that tonight?
Yeah, I mean, the sense of the early trends is obvious here, which is even on the slivers of data, hard to find where the positive point is. I've heard the conversations about early stuff out of Wannon that the panel's been discussing. But another thing worth mentioning, and I know Tom just referenced it, but the One Nation factor is really interesting here, okay? So the last federal election, they were... In these early trickles, they are at 10% of the national vote right now. This matters because, of course, they are not sending their preferences on a long journey back to an eventual choice between Liberal and Labor. In many key seats, and certainly in the Senate, a much closer expectation of preferences being swapped very early. Now, to give you an idea, in New South Wales, One Nation is currently at about 7 and a bit, almost 8%. That's up on the last election. In Victoria, now this is a really interesting factor that right now One Nation running at 10%, huge uplift as to where it was at the last election. The expectation there is that that is going to be one of those stories about those outer suburban areas, that maybe you're not going to go straight from the Labor Party to the Liberal Party. Maybe you're going to go via One Nation, but then if you're going to turn around and follow a how to vote card, the preferences start to go back. Also, Queensland, the One Nation vote currently at 11%, and Tasmania, where the battle for that Senate seat will be discussed in a couple of hours' time, they're currently running at 7%.
Paul, Sherry, thank you. Let's go live to Chris and Laura at Labor HQ. And any reaction there? What's your reaction as well to the results we've seen so far?
Yeah, g'day, Kieran. It's starting to fill up here, isn't it, Laura? Some of the campaign workers, the Labor staffers getting in here, starting to get on the beers. Bit of expectation here, no doubt. No doubt many of them will be wanting to buy me a little later on, but too early, of course, to get any definitive results. But no one's expecting a change of government. Of course, we're looking at where the seats are going to fall, how many the coalition can pull back. One thing I wanted to mention was the polls, because at the moment we're comparing the polls to what the actual vote was 3 years ago. But if you compare the polls to what the polling said on election day 3 years ago, Labor's actually polling less. Newspoll had them at 36% on the Saturday of the last election, and they came in at less than 33%. So there is expectation that the polls again could overestimate the Labor vote, and it could be a little bit better for the coalition tonight than the polling suggests. That's what the coalition will be hoping for, of course. I wanted to mention the first politician I ever worked for. You'll know this man, John Olsen, former Premier of South Australia, former Liberal Premier of South Australia. I often tell him that he's got the best job in the country and the worst job in the country. The worst job in the country is he's the federal president of the Liberal Party, so he'll be at the Liberal headquarters tonight gnashing his teeth about all this. But the best job in the country is that he's the chair of the magnificent Adelaide Crows, and they've had a big win tonight, so he'll be happy. One win in the bag for John Olsen, the Liberal president.
Good on you for finding the positives tonight,
But Jamie Briggs is a Carlton supporter, so that won't go down too well.
No, that's not going down too well. Look, the trend for Labor is all going the way they expect, they want it to tonight. It's hard to find any good news for the Liberal Party early on. I've looked at some early seats. The seat of Bendigo is probably the outlier. I know that David Littleproud has spent a lot of time there. You've spoken to him early tonight. He is pretty confident about getting that seat. He has early swings, big swings to the Nats on that very early count, of course. But if you look elsewhere, I mean, look at Braddon. There was, and I know Tom looked at this just before, that was a retiring member in Gavin Pearce, so you don't have that value of incumbency there in Braddon. But on early swings, he's down like double digits there, and Trumpet of Patriots looks like it's paying off. Those text messages in that seat of Tasmania. So, you know, not a shifter, Trumpet of Patriots, but it was an annoyance right throughout the campaign. You've got to have to think it has some kind of effect. The other one I'm looking at here, I think there's about 10 booths in Gilmore now. They are quite small booths, but there's not a lot of good news for Andrew Constance at the moment. There was 373 votes in it last time around. This is his fifth crack at trying to get into Parliament, and I can't find a lot of good news there. Very
they get
small
Gilmore.
booths.
If they don't pick up Gilmore, it's a very ugly night.
Look at the Kangaroo Valley booths that have been moving towards Labor. You've got to look at some of those coastal areas as well, and it is tight.
And that fracturing,
really
as you say,
tight
with the Trumpets and the others.
And I think what we're looking at so far tonight is that there are individual by-elections, dozens of them at this election campaign. So yes, we can look at the trends, but there is that battle. And I'm going to mention Bean again. This is a seat in the ACT. I mentioned it as an absolute outside chance, exotic bet, if you like. And they've seen big swings to the independents there. And you're probably seeing why Labor wanted to do a deal with the Libs on this seat. So very early count, of course, but got to get excited about something, don't we, Chris?
Yes,
Back to you,
indeed.
KG.
Laura, Chris, thank you. Well, we're going to get excited about one seat. We're going to call it, and call the first seat of the night, the seat of New England. Barnaby Joyce has held on to the seat of New England. Congrats, Barnaby.
Well, no, I shouldn't look.
It's an early count, but we're going to call it.
Very humbled. Always say to people, stay humble, and I'm very blessed that I've got such beautiful people that keep backing me in.
Your volunteers are watching, I know, tonight in Tamworth.
I know. Hello, Tamworth, and I apologise. I got to get on this to match up with that fella, Murray Watt. Otherwise, he gets away with blue murder, right? So we've got to do this, and it's
congratulations on your win.
I'll be back. Thank you very much, Murray. I'll be back up there in Tamworth tomorrow, and I'm really looking forward to catching up with everybody.
Excellent. Well, there's the first seat called. We called it early, but, you know, we wanted some excitement.
Pretty emphatic. If Barnaby didn't hold New England, then we were in very weird territory.
The sky was about to fall in. Yeah.
I'm also getting some mail on Gilmore that Andrew Constance is in a lot of trouble in terms of winning that seat. I've got some Liberal scrutiny email on that. So, yeah, if they can't pick up Gilmore, it's a bit of a concern.
Wow. Yeah, that is. I mean, I know they are early days. We're talking very early numbers, but we're passing on the mail and this is from the scrutineers in the room counting the votes. Chris Ullman?
Yeah, well, look, they had that one in their column, right? And this goes back to what Andrew said, you know, that if the Liberals do not pull up above 65 seats, then that's bad. And if they really don't pull up above 60, then that's catastrophic.
It becomes a big problem for next time.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So the issue that they had was they're never going to win this election, right? And let's not forget, by the way, Peter Dutton said that he had a one-term strategy. So when people are saying we're never going to get there, well, they said that they were going to get there. Everything had to go completely right for them, and it didn't, and largely through their own fault, really, I would have to say. So, but the problem that the coalition's got becomes an existential one. It becomes a Western Australia, South Australia, Victoria, ACT problem where they will never be in a position again to govern if they're not. And so we look at the national primary vote. See, this is the issue, right? The Labor Party is going backwards, but the coalition is also going backwards. Yes. And I know people say wait for more of the vote. You start going backwards in the middle of the night. So, you know, and again, wait till 10 o'clock. There's always this new bar we have to hurdle. Things will change. It'll turn around later in the vote. But if you are going backwards early in the night, that's a very bad sign. So on those primary votes now, and again, terrible for the Labor Party under 30%, but they're still in a position where they can form government, right? And they're going to. But the coalition now starts to worry about making all of those 1%ers which are getting little seats over the line. So this is, and again, the two-party preferred vote, as the night continues, will become very confusing because we now have contests where it's not a two-party preferred vote anymore. So let's keep an eye on the primary vote. If you're going backwards on your primary vote compared to the last election, you are not winning.
But that's why you need 52, 53 from majority for the reasons you're talking about in the two-party preferred. You can't get there with 51 anymore.
Let's have a look at a few other seats. I want to look at... what was it, Mitchell? We were looking at this one. Have a look at this. There's a big swing against one of the former Liberal ministers.
Alex Hawke, I think it's about 6.7 or something like that early, but very, very small count. But there's movement against him. Some numbers there are worth...
That counts too small.
Worth watching.
Yeah, it is small, but it is also surprising.
It's substantial.
We'll just keep an eye on it.
Gorton too. There's some pre-polls coming in Gorton. This is one of those seats, 10% are Labor's way. Libs 45, Labor at 38. Now, again, that's very, very early, but they're just... the Victorian ones, as I said, don't look at Victoria like you're looking at the rest of the country, but they're indicators of sentiment against Labor.
Murray, what are your scrutinies?
Yeah, I was just going to... We checked in about Gorton, and as those figures show, it's pretty flat there in terms of the Labor primary vote. Doesn't look like there's a significant swing to the coalition at this point in time, or certainly not enough to win it, but obviously these are very, very early figures. We did get some figures earlier as well on the federal seat of Brisbane, one of the Greens held seats, which saw an encouraging swing towards Labor on one of the early booths. It's just I'm sort of seeing what other figures I can get, but only one booth at this point in time. But that is very much a key target for Labor in Queensland. If we can win Brisbane, that'd be a good start.
Having Dornoch with Trevor Evans, I do expect Labor to win that because Stephen Bates is an absolute non-event and Trevor Evans, even though he's popular, it's just too hard for him to get enough primary.
I think that's right. I mean, we've always been hopeful about Brisbane. We only narrowly lost it last time round, and there's some good, encouraging early figures there for Labor on screen now. My view has always been the LNP primary vote in Brisbane would not be high enough to overcome whichever of Labor or the Greens came second. So as long as we get above the Greens in Brisbane...
Well, given you're preferencing each other as well.
Indeed.
And this is the other issue too for the coalition. If you're not seeing a coalition person sitting on 43% of the vote, then they will struggle to get preferences. Now, this time around it might be slightly different because we're seeing the One Nation vote is up, so there will be somewhere for them to garner some preferences that they didn't have last time around. But you could pretty much say in the last election, if you didn't see the Liberal and National sitting on 43% of the vote, then it was going to be strife.
I think there's another dynamic in there, especially in Queensland and to a slightly lesser extent New South Wales, and that's Jared Rennick's new party, People First. That was a quiet one. It was under the surface, but he has such a huge following amongst a certain constituency. And from my time in Queensland and Dawson...
Is it just in Queensland?
Well, I think it's at its pinnacle in Queensland, and he had no trouble manning booths. And I think through this night, he's not going to win a seat, but I think he will have an effect on where primary votes go. And most certainly there's going to be a fascinating outcome of what happens in the Senate. We're going to have to watch that very closely.
We will indeed, Barnaby Joyce. Good point. Let's head to Hobart now. I'm going to bring in One Nation leader Pauline Hanson. Pauline Hanson, thanks for your time. It's not just your party preference flow that we're really interested in. Obviously, that's important. But your daughter Lee running for the Senate spot in Tasmania, are you confident she can defeat Jackie Lambie for that spot?
Look, there was good feeling on the polls today. I was on the polling booth all day today, and people were very receptive of Lee and very impressed with her. The thing is, Jackie Lambie hasn't been seen around the state. She hasn't put any signage up. She has not stood any lower house candidates in any of the 5 seats. She had no volunteers handing out how to vote cards right across where I heard. Up and around her area, northwest of Tasmania, a lot of feedback I'm getting through, great support for One Nation. So it's going to be quite interesting once we see these votes come in. So I'm very upbeat about Lee hopefully winning the seat.
Pauline, Andrew Clennell here. Can I ask how you feel your preferences will go? Often they go about 55, 45, 60, 40 to the coalition. You're getting a stronger vote in some areas. How do you think they'll flow, and what do you think of the performance of Peter Dutton during this campaign?
Yeah. I think the outflow of preferences to the coalition will be higher this time because we've got a lot of coalition voters that have actually come across the One Nation and happy because we're flowing our preferences back to the coalition. Although I think that we've taken a lot of coalition votes as well, but I think there are disgruntled Labor voters as well voting One Nation. Early polling shows that we're up in the voting, and it's very early polling, so we're up in what we were last time. So it's basically a protest vote against the major political parties. What I've heard from a lot of people on the ground is they're not happy with Peter Dutton and his performance. He hasn't been, that backbone, the leadership qualities they're looking for people. He hasn't shown what he's going to do. And I think when he backpedaled on about the public servants in Canberra, they need to be reined in. It has to be accountability for the taxpayers' dollars. These people need to be back in the office working, not working from home or travelling the country collecting taxpayers' wages. So there are a few things that I don't think he's really counteracted the Labor or Albanese over the nuclear and the cost of that, or Medicare. He hasn't counteracted it. He didn't know how to answer that. It's been a very strong campaign by Labor and the Albanese and what they put forward, what the Libs were going to do.
Pauline, Murray Watt here. I think there was just some questions about preference arrangements between One Nation and the coalition this time round. That's fine. That's fine. I'm not being critical. My question was. My understanding is that for the first time possibly ever, the coalition preferenced One Nation number 2 in the majority of seats, at least in Queensland, if not elsewhere.
I did.
What do you think explains that change in position from the coalition, that they moved from the John Howard position of putting you guys last to all of a sudden putting you number 2?
Because, Murray, right from the beginning, John Howard, when we won 11 seats in 1998, put the fear into both you and the coalition, John Howard at that time. And you were determined to actually get rid of One Nation. That's why you have preferenced us last. Your stance about we are a racist party is a load of rubbish. You know that. You know we are a contending factor of you winning seats in the parliament. So you keep this farce going. When you look at the Greens, what they stand for, but you preference them again above One Nation, you know, Murray, you can lie straight in bed. And the whole fact is you keep saying One Nation. Because I work with the coalition, I don't agree with everything that they say. They don't agree with everything that I say either. But I'll tell you this, Murray, you backed me on the dairying industry when you were in opposition, that to support the dairying industry. Then when you were in government, I had a meeting with you and I said, Murray, what are we going to do about the dairying industry? You did absolutely nothing. You are not true to your word. It's a political game to you. It's not to me. I have no time for you or the Labor Party. You're all talk, no action.
But why has Peter Dutton preferenced you number 2?
I wouldn't keep asking the questions if I was you.
Well, she hasn't answered.
It's not going so well for you, mate.
Now you know what it feels like, mate.
Going very
This is exactly what it feels like.
Thank you. I'm going to. Well, we could keep going on that, but
you do not consult.
That was a good spray, and I think it
you
might
do
be
not
time to move.
consult with us. You actually have passed 220 pieces of legislation without consultation, debate on the floor of Parliament. You're
full in hands.
absolute joke.
Yeah.
The Labor Party. So that's their thought. Okay.
Thank you for joining us, Pauline. Appreciate it.
It just came out on the
Murray
plate.
Watt, appreciate it. It's great because we get everyone involved in the discussions. We've got Kooyong now, and Monique Ryan joins us, the Teal MP. Thanks for your time. How are you feeling as the early stages of the vote count has begun, Monique? You confident of holding on?
No, look, I'm not at all confident feeling. It's going to be very close in Kooyong, I think. It's going to be close in so many electorates around the country. I'm really not sure what's going to happen tonight. It's been a pretty hard-fought campaign, and I'm hoping that I've done enough for the electorate and demonstrated enough effectiveness in the last 3 years to be able to hold the seat of Kooyong, but we'll have to see, I think.
There's been, obviously a lot that's happened in the 3 years, but obviously last time there was that Teal wave. Have you still got the same sense within your community that people are committed to those issues that you won on in the first place, or has the issue of cost of living overwhelmed a lot of that?
Well, look, I think that the thing that cost the coalition, the government in 2022 was climate. And I think it was shocking to people in Kooyong that in 2025 the coalition didn't come to the election with a single policy which was going to decrease our emissions within the next 10 years. And so I've heard many times in the last few months that people are surprised and disappointed that climate is not on the agenda of the major parties. Yes, people are talking about cost of living. There's no doubt that that's front of mind for them. But many of the issues that feed into that, whether we're talking about electricity prices, gas prices, petrol prices, insurance and grocery prices, are things which are very much contingent on the impact of cost of living on those measures domestically. So people are a bit surprised, I think, and have been really disappointed with the coalition in particular in its inability or reluctance to engage with climate change in the electorate of Kooyong.
Monique Ryan, Andrew Clennell, you've indicated it's going to be right down to the wire. Are you surprised, especially where the Liberals might end up tonight, that Josh Frydenberg didn't have another crack at Kooyong?
Well, I think, Andrew, you probably have to talk to Josh Frydenberg about that. You know, it's an electorate which does look a bit different from 2022. Obviously, there's been a redistribution which changes its margins quite significantly, but I can't speak to the inner machinations of people in the Liberal Party.
Monique Ryan, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Early days, but we'll stay in touch. Thank you. Let's go live to Blaxland now in Sydney. Sky's Ross Greenwood is with Labor campaign spokesman Jason Clare. Ross.
Indeed, you don't get much more heartland of Labor Party than this, Flaxland. Really one of the great seats for the Labor Party over many, many years. Paul Keating's seat, of course. It's an important one, but look, even though it is quite clearly a Labor seat, the fact of the matter is that things such as cost of living are so important to people in this electorate. Jason Clare is with me, the sitting member, been here for quite a while, 2007. Jason, that's the big issue. It is a welded-on Labor seat. But, you know, you can't take things for granted given the way in which cost of living has affected so many people.
No, you never can. If you take your seat for granted, you lose it. That's the bottom line. Cost of living is the biggest issue in every seat, I think, across the country. So is healthcare, so is education. I guess the unique part in my seat is the war in Gaza. The impact of that in my community is real and big, and I think we'll probably see that in the results tonight.
It's interesting also, go to your education portfolio as the Education Minister. One of the key sort of messages and the promises from this, which has now been passed, is cutting 20% off HECS debts for student debt. And that's a key thing, again, for taking some pressure off families.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people with a HECS debt around the country, about 3 million Aussies. And in a lot of the seats that you'll focus on tonight, some of those battleground seats, we're talking 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people that voted today have a HECS debt. And so the promise to cut that debt by 20% is, I think, a big motivator for people to vote Labor today. We're talking, the average HECS debt's about 27 grand, so you're talking about cutting their debt by 5 grand or more. A lot of people I spoke to knew exactly how much HECS debt they had and were voting Labor because they wanted to see that debt cut.
The other thing in this electorate in particular, but so many others around the country, is just skills and training. And of course, with a big migrant population in this electorate, having the skills, being able to be trained to do the jobs that are emerging, that's absolutely key. And that's where more places, more free places for TAFE have been so important.
Yeah, a lot of people who want to get more skills but can't afford to get them, attracted to free TAFE. If you can have a free TAFE course, get the skills that you need, then it's going to make you more ready for work. And so that's why that's important. If I can put a quick plug in, the funding that we're putting into public schools to help more kids finish school is important too. We want more kids to finish school and then go to TAFE or uni or whatever's best for them. We had a plan at this election to improve education, build a better education system, and hopefully we see that play out in the ballot box today.
And is it too early to call Blaxland or not?
Yeah, it is actually. Yeah. You know, this is Paul Keating territory, but we had a real battle on our hands today. This is the biggest and hardest fight I've ever had for this seat, so fingers crossed it all turns out okay.
There you go. I'll tell you, Kieran, back to you from a bit of Labor heartland, but as you can hear, Jason Clare just waiting to see the numbers drop.
Ross, yep, I think it's wise too, given the challenge he's faced. Thanks. Let's go live to Tom Connell. Tom, with some fresh numbers, they're flooding in now.
Yeah, they really are starting to. So some very interesting areas to look at. And I must say, so far, I'm not calling anything just yet, but I'm just seeing a lack of good news, which is what we often say early when it comes to the coalition. So let's have a look first of all at some of these central areas. I'm going to go to the seat here. I think we've got Bradfield. So this was something obviously the coalition had and they just held off last time against the Teals. Relatively early vote, but that primary is now 9.3%. That's a decent amount. You can see the swing against Liberal Party 6% on a match basis, 11 towards the Climate 200 backed candidate Nicolette Buller. So very early numbers on two-party preferred. You can see that's a big swing, though, towards there. So this part here is a lot earlier than the primary, but the primary isn't getting any better so far. That sort of figure, that's gettable considering the trends of on the day and postable. So we're not saying yet this is, even if that rate continues, it's not able to be clawed back. But that's obviously would be a concern already. One where I did see a little bit of a swing towards the coalition. Let's go to Western Sydney where they had their campaign launch. I was seeing a swing before. Let's see what Werra was looking like. So you could see, let's have a look here because the margin, 5.3%, well, there you go, a swing against Labor. But those last few figures, just since I was waiting to come on, have come against the Liberal Party, if you like. Where that's playing out right now, two-party preferred, a slight swing towards the Labor Party. Again, way too early, 2.3% counted. And again, on the day in pre-poll is going to come back to the Liberal Party. They wouldn't want to have to come back from that, but let's wait till they're 30 or 40% of the count in. We mentioned before as well that Queensland was going to be crucial to this contest. Let's visit the Sunshine State and go down to the area here of Brisbane first of all. Let's go first of all to Dixon. This is the seat, of course, of the opposition leader, You can see here right now a lead of 8% for the Labor Party. Let's dig into that and see exactly what it's meaning. 6.1% has been counted. You can see a big swing against Peter Dutton, a pickup from independent vote, which will favour, albeit some of that is coming from the Greens. So as this vote sort of washes through, clearly Ailey France here is going to be advantaged by that. So a big swing at the moment. Look, it's only very early on, but that's obviously not what you want to see as opposition leader. So I'm going to dig into some of those booths and exactly where they are to see how significant this is. You do get in Peter Dutton's seat, it's peri-urban, some very different areas of that seat. So not a great sign early on. This is what I'm saying around overall sort of good news, if you like. How much of it so far is good news on the Liberal Party and not all that much. The other seat let's have a look at is Bonner. So it's red now, but it was blue. 8% is the current margin from Labor. Digging into what's happening and where that's happening, you can see 11% swing. See, it's just all these numbers updating as we come in. So the swing against Ross Vasta's just dropped a bit. There is a swing against the Greens, interestingly, slightly against One Nation as well. So this was held by 3.4%. You're seeing at the moment quite a big swing. Again, very early for the Labor Party. We know early on the day vote's going to help them. That's still a significant swing. That's beyond the sort of on the day skewing, if you like, albeit very early on. We might go down to Tasmania. We have called quite a few seats, just taken them off the board. We haven't called any flips yet. If I'm going to do that, I'll come on and tell people. But in terms of calling some seats and getting them off the board, I'll just make sure I'm getting here down to Clark. Is it going to play ball with me? Here it is, 18.9%. So just alerting you to the fact that, you know, the crossbench and whether or not any of them fall, well, no surprise on a margin of 20%. We're not predicting that Andrew Wilkie is going to fall. Only 2% counted, but happy enough to say that he will be returned again and hold on to that seat. And Cunningham was another one I just noticed before as well, a relatively safe Labor seat. Let's go into Cunningham. Here we go. So already it was a Labor-held seat. No big surprise, 15%. You just want to make sure nothing funny is going on. It's not so far, 17.2%. That's quite a decent amount of primary counted. As we go to two-party preferred, there is swing towards. We're going to see the Labor Party hang on to that seat as well. So we're happy to say that's going to be a Labor Party hold. If it's going to play ball with me, there we go. All right, no problem. So let's go to where we're at right now in terms of the state of the House. It is starting to take shape. This is the pre-election, of course, 78 for Labor. So far, you've got more for the coalition because of the nature of those outer areas. We get more votes in some of those regional areas. So this is not indicative of where we are. I think the concern right now for the coalition, Kieran, is we're actually seeing more seats where Labor's ahead where they were behind, so ahead in terms of flipping, and the coalition is the other way around. So I'm going to dig into this and see if there's a consequential call that could result in a few minutes' time.
You go and keep digging, and we will discuss some other seats here with our panel. Barnaby Joyce. One of the seats we've been talking about in the lead-up is the seat of Hunter, held by the Fitzgibbons for a long time. How's it looking tonight?
Nats are slightly ahead. So that's a very good thing. And Sue Gilroy and the crowd there will be, congratulations, Sue, thus far, early in the night, but well done. And postals will come in, and one would imagine that they would slightly favour us. So I'm not for a long shot calling Hunter, but I'm saying this is really in for it. And might I say one of the reasons, I hate to say it, but the candidate against me in New England had a train wreck interview where she attacked the coal miners and talked about transitioning and they'd all be out of a job. I put it up on Facebook and we had 45,000 people in that area watched it or listened to it. And that's the sort of thing that happens, a slip of a candidate, a bad message. And we had people, when I was handing out in Muswellbrook, just walking, coming in straight out of the mines, walking straight past the Labor candidate and saying, don't worry about it, mate, you don't support coal. And actually people coming up and saying, does Barnaby support coal? And this is another thing they don't see in urban areas, but it really swings votes in mining towns, in regional areas. And I think there was a bit of collateral damage has gone Dan's way from Laura up the road.
Let's hear from Joel. Joel Fitzgibbon, what are you hearing from your successor in that seat?
I don't have any information on Hunter yet, but I feel very confident that Barnaby's numbers are coming from
the Australian Electoral Commission.
Rural seat, well, they're coming through the AU, so I'm not challenging you. I'm just saying they'd be early votes coming from the smaller rural booths. When the big booths in towns like Cessnock and Kurri and Western, Labor heartland start coming in, I think you'll see that turn around.
I'm not claiming. I'm just saying it's surprising, Joel, because on the redistribution...
But those numbers are way different.
I was going to say that...
It's 9%.
Yeah, he's getting a swing to him in that seat at the moment.
Well, they've got Stuart Bonds will be overwhelming preference in Sue Gilroy there.
Yeah, but he's getting a swing to him. This is what I'm saying about across the country, and we're seeing a pattern emerge now, right? It's very early days, which is that, yes, the government's losing across the country, is losing some primary vote, but the coalition is losing more primary vote than the government's losing at the moment. It's going backwards on skates. So things are going to have to turn around remarkably from here.
And look, senior Labor people have been talking up Dixon to me for weeks. I thought I was getting spun, so I didn't really buy it. Maybe I'm not getting spun. And Peter Dutton was there, I think, Friday morning.
Yeah, he's been there a couple of times in the last week.
I mean, they just kept saying it to me, and I thought, this is, it's like, this is one of these things you hear, this rubbish, But he looks like he might even,
But the thing is,
was
that your expectation?
Yeah, I mean, it is early days still in Dixon, and I remember when we did this 3 years ago, we were ahead in Dixon at one point. And
you get the pre-polls and it fixes up.
But, I mean, we have always thought that we're a chance in Dixon. It is the most marginal seat in Queensland, about 1.4%. Ailey is running for the third time, a really great, hard-working candidate. I do think Peter Dutton suffered something locally from the whole flood issue and whether he was there and whether he wasn't there. But also this Teal candidate, Ellie Smith, who you can see on screen. I think the result will come down to whose votes is she taking and where are they going, and it would appear she's taking a lot of those votes from Peter Dutton.
Peter's also got the problem that as being the leader of the coalition, he's always in someone else's seat and rarely in his own.
Yeah.
And it was a highly marginal seat. You have to work the ground, you have to work the doors, you have to work every market. It's a tough game for him. It's a huge sacrifice.
As leader, though, that should, if you've done well as leader, that should give its own backing to your vote. Most of the time.
I think the other thing...
When
that's the point. He didn't have a good
people were
campaign.
more tribal, I'd say that's true. I think it's harder now.
When you're in a margin.
Can we have a look at Aston? Can we just pull up Aston? Because, look, like Gilmore, this is another one which was basically in the Liberal column, that there was a belief that both sides believed they had this, right? And I think with the pre-poll, maybe they still do. I will say that. I mean, they certainly, the Liberals, of course, won it in 22, but as things stand at the moment, you'd have to say Mary Doyle's a decent chance there. So another bad sign, Aston, Gilmore, where are the Liberal wins coming at all?
That will be if we do manage to hold Aston, that will be an extraordinary result.
Do you think you're more confident than you hold Aston, you get majority? Is that your view?
Absolutely.
I would agree.
Absolutely.
Well,
because this, I think if there was one seat in the country that the coalition felt confident about, it was Aston.
Yep,
and if they can't get that...
Can I ask Sarah Henderson, is there anywhere in the country where you can see Liberals taking a seat off Labor at the moment?
Well, can I just say on Aston, and I've worked very closely with our wonderful candidate, Manny Cicchello, I think it's just so early to make any of these sorts of calls. Yes, at the moment, based on the vote today coming from a small number of booths, we're seeing a bit of a swing to Labor. But remember, on average, half of all Victorians and Australians have already voted in pre-poll. And so, like the Queensland election where everyone, Labor was... Stephen Miles was getting up there and telling everyone he was going to be the Premier going forward, and of course we know that didn't happen. So, Murray, I just say to you not to get too excited.
Absolutely.
We know where that... I'll just say we know where the trends are going. I mean, we can see we've got lots and lots of challenges, not denying any of that.
Can you see a single seat that you're probably going to take off Labor or might have a chance at the moment of taking off Labor?
Oh, look, I'm not going to call anything. It's far too early, Andrew. That's the
I agree. We put in a pin now and say that the pre-polls are going to come in later, but the short story is at the moment the coalition is going backwards, so it has to make up ground and then some more.
Well, it's actually not too early to call something. We're going to make a call. Tom Connell's joining us with a call of his own. It's early, but go for it.
Yeah, so, Kieran, we've got about 8% of the national vote in. I've been really cautious around talking about the fact that we're very cognizant of the fact we're going to see a correction, we think, with that pre-polling on the day. But here's the problem right now, even with that amount in, just going to get away from this page here, even with that amount in, this is the problem at the moment in terms of Peter Dutton. So this is a path for him to pick up seats to a majority, if you like. These are all the margins before the election. These are the live margins now. These are all actually going out. So New South Wales, we're seeing very little joy for them. We go to Victoria as well. And again, so let's go back to the pre-picture. Victoria meant to be a happy hunting ground. We can see Chisholm 3.3, 3.8, 5.3 Bruce and a couple of Teal seats as well. And these are the live margins coming in. You can see they're all growing as well. So this is the issue again. So let's return to the previous margins. Let's have a look at Queensland. Again, this is where they're on the hunt for seats. And if we flick it over here, we can see right at the moment, they're not getting any of those. We've got an issue with Bruce popping up. Don't worry about that. That's not in Queensland. So that's the issue. And the other problem is right now, there does seem to be legitimate momentum in Tasmania and quite a way through the count to question whether or not Labor can win them. Now, these, I would say, are going to be more a case of I want to see some of the on the day here coming in, but you can see the trend in going so far in terms of two-party Fred, the swing going towards the ALP. So this is too early right now in Bass, but you can see part of the problem here. So the issue is I'm just not seeing enough good news. And here's the other element to all of this, Kieran. This is not saying the election's done yet overall, but this is the starting point. For getting a majority, we're talking about them winning 20 seats. Even if the coalition can win 6 over in the west of the country, we are just not seeing the momentum. Clearly, there's not a swing on for them in New South Wales and Queensland. There could be some pickups still in Victoria. But as a result, we're saying the coalition will not form a majority government. OK, so you've called that, and I think that's reasonable, Tom, given the numbers we're seeing at the moment. Andrew Clennell, that's an early call. Obviously, we're not calling the election at this point,
well,
but
I'm struggling to see whether they can win
clear.
more than about 1 seat off Labor at the moment. I don't think they'll be anywhere near minority government.
Joel?
Kieran, I said at the beginning of the night that you'd be very courageous to call it majority or minority at that point. And even suggested that, anyone who's doing so, it wasn't a reflection on Richo, by the way, who always seems to get it right, but those who were doing so were just taking a punt. But I think it's fair to say that it would be even more courageous now to suggest that Labor's not going to get a majority government tonight. I think there are enough numbers in to determine that.
You think Labor's got majority? I mean, they only need to lose 2 seats or 3 seats and we haven't been to WA yet, I might add.
Well,
we've got Bullwinkle, we've got Tangney.
Well, I'm just told
it's just a little early, I think, for that.
Just from a friend, not from an official source, that there's a 5% swing to Labor in the seat of Adelaide, safe Labor seat. The swings seem to be going Labor's way in every state, and I don't know how that turns around.
I think, but we said at the start, I think we all play this game, don't we? We all walk into the cool room at the start and say exactly what's going to happen, and it happens, and then we all come onto the panel and act surprised because that's what we're paid to do, I suppose. But
did you expect Labor majority? I mean, fair enough. You probably expected Labor win.
I said right at the start, there's only been one one-term government in the history of Australia. There's only been one one-term government in the history of Australia, and what I never wanted to do, and I'd say to my colleagues, is don't overbid on what you're saying when you go in, because, I always see government at that this is actually half-time, not full-time. And people always want to call it full-time. You go in with they go in with candidate disease. There's going to be a change in government. We're going to be the second time since 1932. And you just say, pull back, find a different gear in the column shift, OK? It's the Australian people will always they gave Julia Gillard a second go. They gave Gough Whitlam a second go. That's how the Australian people are.
Normally you get a haircut on the first
Well, maybe not. But what you can't do in the second term is start making the same excuse in the first term, like we're only just there, it's another 10 years.
Yeah.
If you're not dealing with cost...
Normally you lose a few seats.
You are right. They normally get a haircut.
Well, Gillard lost 11, or the Howard lost a whole heap on GST.
A majority Labor outcome would be a bad outcome for the Liberal.
I don't think it's done and dusted, because you look at Bean, you look at Aston, you can think about Bullwinkle, but I know where you're heading. I mean, it's more likely than not.
We're talking about the Leader of the Opposition not holding his seat.
Yeah, although Murray points out that can come back. That can come back. The other issue is Bonner, the seat you mentioned. How are you feeling about that?
I mean, those figures look really good for us.
Let's bring up Bonner, let's have a look at it.
I think everyone, agrees that it's too early.
And Brisbane.
Yeah, I think all of us agree that it's too early to call anything because we're waiting for pre-polls. Traditionally, pre-polls...
But look at that percentage now, Murray. That's up over 10% now.
It's a big shift.
That's a huge swing.
It's a big shift on primary.
That is a huge swing.
And the thing about Bonner is that, in any other state, it would be a marginal Labor seat. It's a suburban capital city seat. And frankly, we've underperformed in Queensland for far too long. And there's a possibility tonight that we get back to where a major party should be in one of our states. So, again, great candidate, great campaign. Just getting back to the pre-polls issue, I think what will be interesting, I think we all agree we're going to wait and see those figures before we call anything. We need to remember that, the Coalition campaign had a poor start, and it will be interesting to see whether people had made up their minds early in this campaign to vote against the Coalition, and whether the general rule
we'll
about
see that with the
pre-polls
pre-polls.
It'll be interesting to see whether the tradition of Coalition pre-poll holds.
But the dial's got to come back a long way. So if we look through this at the moment, right, the national vote. Now, the Labor Party is losing skin, but it's just the Coalition is losing more. So it's down 2.4% of its primary vote, but the Coalition's down 3.3% of its primary vote. New South Wales is a disaster for them at the moment. The Coalition's losing 5% of its primary vote. You go across to Queensland, it's losing 7% of its primary vote. The only place you can find any joy is in Victoria, where the Labor Party has lost about 7.5% of its primary vote. But that trend right across the country, you're going to have to see a very, very big change at 8, 9, 10 o'clock tonight.
I'm telling you, people don't like Anthony Albanese that much, but I'll tell you who they don't like, Peter Dutton. And I saw it when I knocked doors, and you see it with a 60% disapproval rating. And it's unfortunate. Peter Dutton's a nice guy, I reckon, but despite some of his public image, but he just wasn't cutting through. People were comparing him to Trump. He was all over the shop during the campaign, and women in particular at the doors did not like Peter Dutton.
It's true, though, when you look at Peter in a campaign, people switch on at some point and then they'll compare the pair. I think to a lesser extent, it looks like at this stage, but when Bill Shorten, people looked at him and made the comparison, they didn't like what they saw. Are we seeing the same thing happen here?
Well, they looked at Anthony Albanese at the last election. They didn't like him either, in the sense that the Labor primary was very low and he had a very gaffe-prone campaign, but they disliked Scott Morrison more. So in the end, it's a contest between what's on offer. Not the very best Prime Minister out of history. You don't get to drum up who you'd really like. You get a choice between two that are offered. And it's no surprise, this whole thing about the image of Peter Dutton, well, that's been a known quantity for some time. I mean, there was a view people had about Tony Abbott. The first thing you had to do when we got in December that year, in 2009, was try and disrupt that. You won't change it for everyone, but you have to disrupt that or you're not even in the game. I don't sometimes feel there was enough disruption of the narrative, the framing narrative.
They lent into it, didn't they?
But one of the reasons for that...
well, that's portfolios. Unfortunately for him, a history of time in portfolios that carried that persona, And then, of course, I think with the voice to a detriment, he was out campaigning the no case, not furnishing his policy work and not developing his leadership narrative.
What an irony that would be if the voice was supposed to destroy Albanese and it destroyed Dutton.
In a sense that...
From what you're saying.
Well, in a sense, yes, because he lost... Yes, the Prime Minister lost a year and then lost the referendum, but the opposition lost a year. The opposition was absolutely, because the resourcing is so much smaller, obviously, absolutely and rightly focused on winning that vote.
Did it make them complacent, though? Because they had
not complacent. Not complacent in the sense that if you've got only 50 staffers and the government's got 500, and your 50 staffers are absolutely focused on dealing with the constitutional arguments about the voice and getting MPs prepped up for interviews and all that sort of stuff, who's writing the policy documents? Who's doing the costing? Who's working on the 33-day plan? Who's doing the soft work on the leader's persona?
Yeah, which is pretty crucial, as you said.
Karen, it's starting to sound like a post-mortem, and I think that's appropriate because I think that's what it's looking like now. I'm told that at Labor headquarters they're now moving a number of seats though out of the sort of concern column and into the safer columns. I won't name them yet, and I don't have actual numbers.
So not just
for
a
them,
majority, but a comfortable one, you think?
Oh, well, I'm not prepared to say that yet, but this is going to be a majority government.
Yeah.
I'm prepared to... we have enough votes in and enough states in.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
No doubt it's going to be a Labor majority government.
Let's see some
probably right.
I want to see some Victorian pre-polls.
Yeah, I think you've got to see WA, and you've got to see like the postals and all that as that coming out. I'm not going to say it's going to change it, Joel. I think we're all adult here enough to know what's going on here tonight. But I think it will ameliorate some of these. I wouldn't be sort of holistically calling election day votes what's going to happen at the end of the day. There's a lot of them going to be close, and they'll, you know how it all works, doesn't it? You always think, oh, I've got this one in the bag, and then 3 days later you say it's.
But where did it go wrong, though?
Well, what I started at the start, you've got to have, you know, when you don't go, as has been said, as Peter said, you don't go into the campaign with all the resources of government. You've got to pick a couple of binary issues where they're all for it and you're all against it, or you're all against it and they're all for it. And it really helps if they're already defined, so you don't have to define them to the public. Stop the boats. Now, it's when you're picking something, you have to define and explain, and then you have to take the next step and go and fight for it. You're giving the opportunity to your political opponent to put a lot of mud, a lot of dust and a lot of BS into that area and make it very, very difficult.
Someone just pointed out to me David Coleman's in a bit of strife in Banks. So there's another potential
Let's bring up Banks if we can, quickly.
What are we looking at as potential pickups now? Bonner, Brisbane, Dixon, Banks. So suddenly you're starting to look at majority.
That's not a small percentage there.
Pull off a couple of those, you know.
That's 14% counted.
You know, so...
And
WA doesn't always miss out, but it might tonight in terms of having an influence on the outcome. You know, look at that, wow.
The YouGov poll that came out a couple of days ago that had us getting a bigger majority had Banks coming to us, which, frankly, I didn't really expect to see happen. But, and again, early votes, but that's pretty positive.
Let's bring in... I'll get back to all of you in a moment. I just want to go live to my colleague Andrew Bolt now for his thoughts. Andrew, something I think you've made the point on your program quite a bit. You can't outspend a Labor government in an election campaign, but that's effectively what Peter Dutton did. There wasn't enough definition about what he stood for.
Oh, absolutely not. It was a shopping bag that he brought to a knife fight. I mean, you know, if you don't like this policy, I've got another one, I've got another one. And in the end, I bet you many voters couldn't remember half the policy, or 90% of the policies he was talking about, or even in whose policies they were, because there's no story with them. There was no definition with them, no philosophy behind them. I think this is one, you know, we normally say oppositions don't win elections, governments lose them. I think this is one the coalition did actually lose. They were ahead in the polls only 4 months ago, and by a handy margin. And then they stopped fighting. They stopped fighting on all the things about what little few values they fought for. That went out the window. They were scared of their own shadow. Remember, they won. They beat Labor by... They were winning against Labor by talking about the culture war issues like The Voice, for instance. They beat The Voice. They released their nuclear power plans. They were talking about immigrations. They were talking about China. They were talking about defence, the need to boost defence. But then they stopped. It's just astonishing. They stopped. It was like they were so scared of seeming like a Donald Trump or whatever it was, and flat-footed. I mean, I've seen Murray, and good luck to him. He's been smiling all night, and so he should. Winners are grinners, and winners are losers. But I've seen Murray say time and time again, you know, the central core of the Labor scare campaign was the coalition has got $600 billion nuclear reactors, and they've got secret plans to cut Medicare to pay for them. Every bit of that is a lie. Murray will in his heart know it's a lie, but that's not the issue. The issue here is how come the Liberals and the Nationals, particularly Liberals, couldn't counter it? It was just astonishing. They actually hid the man who knew about the nuclear plan, you know, their energy spokesman, Ted O'Brien. You saw him only in one debate where he tailed up Chris Bowen, and that was it. You didn't see Andrew Hastie for most of the campaign. You didn't see Jacinta Price. And I don't know if Barnaby will tell us the truth. Why was he put in deep freeze too, apart from coming on my show as a regular? I mean, it's just extraordinary. The best communicators were sidelined, and this was a party that lost its guts, and they lost the election.
Andrew Bolt, thank you. We'll catch you soon. I don't know if you heard it, but Barnaby said it worked well in New England being in the deep freeze up in the... up in Armidale. It is a lovely part of the world. But Andrew Bolt, thank you. I want to go live to Watson now. Tony Burke joins us. He's the Leader of the Government in the House of Reps. Senior Cabinet Minister, you must be feeling pretty good right now, Tony Burke, about Watson, but about the election more broadly.
Yeah, look, I'm still very conscious that the feeling on the ground today was better than what we've had at pre-poll. And so I found that across the electorate today. The polling booth, I've had a redistribution, so the polling booths I've represented for the last 20 years were all stronger than the new ones. But the pre-poll votes I don't think will be as strong as what you've got in front of you right now. I'm not sure if that's a trend around the country, but certainly I felt that really strongly here. So for me, it's still very early days. I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful. It's the honour of my life to represent the area I've always lived. But, you know, I'd rather the results be leaning towards me than otherwise, so I'm happy to that extent, but it's way too early for me to think.
We saw and this is not a partisan thing to say, he's a great Australian, Jamal Rifi, a local GP, but he got on board and helped you. How much do you credit him for and that group of Muslim Australians who supported you in the face of a challenge by a Muslim voice party?
Look, I'll be forever grateful, forever grateful. When Jamal Rifi first stepped forward, it wasn't just the influence that he has as a community leader. It was also the fact that up until then, when anyone stepped forward in my support on social media or anywhere else, they were being shouted down pretty loudly. And what Jamal said to me quite early on, he says, "I'll do it in the sun and that'll allow more people to talk for you in the shade." And effectively, that started a whole lot of conversations around the electorate. For me, effectively, the campaign was simply that the person that the local area has known for so many years, it's still me. I'm still advocating in the same way. And Jamal really played an important role in that.
Tony Burke, Andrew Clennell. I have to say maybe one of the key moments in this term for Labor was when you were made Home Affairs Minister, because Claire O'Neill and Andrew Giles were butchering it, and too many people were allowed into the country, and you had this migration detainees issue. You've managed to settle that area down, and I think that's been important in terms of Labor being traditionally seen as weak on borders. Are you prepared to claim any credit tonight for Labor's improvement?
Well, no, I won't. Everything goes to the PM. I will say I think my first TV interview in that portfolio was with you. And I'm not sure it felt like I was settling everything down at that first one. I've got to say that, you know, I'm really proud of the work that all of our officials do, proud of the work of Border Force and proud of the work that gets done in the whole Home Affairs area. With immigration, it is possible to be sensible in making sure that the immigration levels match what's right for Australia, and we've been getting them to more sustainable rates, while also not just beating the drums and making stuff up. I think one of the problems for the opposition in this campaign in trying to make the immigration issue run is they were calling for numbers that just didn't add up, and they couldn't explain what they were going to do. So while I'd love to think that debate was won by my engagement, I think some of it was just lost by the way Peter Dutton handled it.
Tony Burke, thanks for making the time to speak to us. We'll catch you later. Let's bring in Tom Connell with some more analysis and some fresh numbers, Tom.
Yeah, the more we look at this is looking like a very strong chance of a Labor win in some form. They're almost losing no ground. Look, at the moment, actually 24 to 16 in terms of overall seats, first of all. And often we see coalition ones pile up because they have a lot of those outer regional areas where you get the numbers in earlier and it's a bit early to make a call. I'll show you the issue is we're not seeing much ground being made. So let's have a look at the seat of Bennelong, for example. We go in and we see the margin. This was the one they had needed a swing to hold, 0% margin basically. Look at the swing to Jerome Laxale, 13.5%. So right now, 11%, even though it's only 5% counted, that's not something you can just make up on pre-poll and postal. So Bennelong will be a hold for Labor. So there's a key seat that the Liberal Party were targeting, maybe a little bit less so in the past couple of weeks, but still hopeful of it. Now we go to the seat of Reid as well. Again, 5.2%, Inner West, won by the Liberal Party not so long ago. Look at the swing here. Big swing to Labor, big swing against the Liberal Party. Look at this swing against primary, when not so long ago they had the national swing on their side. That's a massive swing against. We will see that come back, I'm sure, in that pre-poll and postal. But that is not what you get back on pre-poll and postal. So that's the problem there. Swing towards 15%, early in, 7%, even though it's only 7%. we're still saying that's going to be a Labor Party hold in that particular seat. So this is part of the issue that's banking up at the moment. And then I mentioned banking up. What about the seat of Banks, which I think you mentioned not that long ago? This is one Labor was targeting it a little bit on the higher side in terms of ambition. What we're seeing so far, a swing against David Coleman. Again, this is the story of the night so far. The margin is 2.6%. Now, here's where I will be more cautious, because right now, pretty early on in the count, 8.5%, this sort of margin is not normally what you'd come back with, but with today's pre-poll and postal and the trends last election compared to this is the sort of margin you can come back from. So I'm not giving that one away yet. We could easily see that correct. This sort of margin is the one they can come back from tonight. 8, 9, less so. So that's the difference with those. We go as well to some of the other targets. We might go to Victoria, because this is an area we're seeing some swings in terms of the coalition, beginning as with